everyone and welcome back to Hidden Voices. If you followed in Social Care Disgrace for a while, or even if you're new here, Hidden Voices is all about creating space for the conversations that don't always get heard. The experiences, the challenges, the successes and the realities that too often get overlooked. Tonight we're continuing that by talking about an issue that affects so many older people, hidden voices too, but doesn't always get the attention it deserves. As always, this is about listening, learning and making sure lived experience stays at the heart of the conversation. So grab a brew, get comfortable and let's get started.
We're hoping everyone here will give us a few pointers as to what needs to change and what we can do about it. So with no more ado, I'm going to go to Neil Duncan Jordan, Labour MP for Poole, who was on the APPG for older people, and he was involved with a leading person in the National Pensioners Convention and also a regional officer for UNISON, along with lots of other stuff. No idea what you're going to say, Neil, but I hope you'll set the scene for us and point us to some things you think could be changed and some directions we could go. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Gilda. It's very nice of you to invite me to speak to the meeting this evening. I'm going to do my best to cover it in 7 minutes. Usually I would go on for much longer. So if I do run over, please interject. Look, I want to start by just talking about some principles before I go into some of the details. It's a very easy argument to make with the public that somebody who suffers from dementia, who has to pay for their care, is treated differently than somebody who has cancer and has their care funded by the rest of us through the state. And that's an argument that we need to keep making because it connects with people, they understand it, they can see the difference very clearly between those two things. And why should we have a hierarchy of illness in which one is treated in a different way to another? So the idea that we have universal collective provision through the NHS and a means-tested system through the social care network is one that we need to keep batting away at. So that's the first point I want to make. There's a principle at stake that we need to get across, and we need to get people to understand what that principle is. The second point is around the Casey review. I mean, I'm on record as criticising the government for the Casey review. We didn't need another look at the social care system. We've had in 20 years over 20 reviews already. All of them have more or less said exactly the same thing, and I'll touch on some of those issues in a second, but all of them have said more or less the same thing. What we did with the Casey review is we missed an opportunity to put something right, or at least start the process of putting something right. So what this government has done is what previous governments have done, is kick the issue into the long grass, effectively. So the Casey report will come out with some interim comments this year, but actually the final report won't come to 2028. And at our very best guess, the next election will be in July 29 at the very outset, probably much sooner than that. So there's no opportunity, in my view, for the government to enact whatever Casey comes up with. And I don't know what she's going to come up with, but whatever she came up with, if the government was minded to adopt it, they've got no time to put it in. And if Labour don't get re-elected at the next general election, let's be clear, a reform government's not going to touch this either. And if they did, it would be even worse than what we have now. So the prospects of social care getting fixed, if we don't get back in, is pretty remote. Even if we do get back in, I think there's a job of work to be done by people like me and others to convince the Labour government, the new Labour government in the post-29 election period, that it has to tackle this issue, and we have to actually do what no other government has been prepared to do before. So that's point number 2. Decades of reports, Casey's review is a missed opportunity, and we should have got on with that job of work when we got elected, not put it into the long grass. The problems are well documented. So we have a sector that's dominated by private industry, largely. With that comes the pursuit of profit over the people that it serves. And because of the very nature of the private companies and the models that they use, we've got a lot of hedge funds involved, we've got overseas investment involved and so on. We see low pay amongst the workforce. A lot of the workforce are overseas workers, and I'll come to that in a second. And with that low pay, because of the certificate of sponsorship that many of them need to be able to work in the social care sector, we see a lot of abuse and harassment and intimidation that staff face, because if they don't play ball with the employer, they'll take their certificate of sponsorship away, and then they've got 6 weeks to find another sponsor, or they have to leave the country. I've been calling for a certificate of common sponsorship, which means that the industry provides the certificate of sponsorship, not the individual employer. This would give the workers the right to move from employer to employer without losing their certificate, without losing their sponsorship. Put power back into the hands of the workforce, take it away from the employer. The government has yet to sort of endorse that, but it's something that we need to keep pushing. One of the problems that we face, though, particularly in this respect, is that we have 100,000 plus vacancies in the sector. We rely on overseas workers to fill those vacancies, and yet the Home Office is pursuing a policy of changing the indefinite leave to remain rules at the moment, including for those who are already here, to make it much more difficult for them to stay. That means you've got two areas of government pointing in the opposite direction. You've got the Health and Social Care Department that recognises it needs to fill these 100,000 vacancies. And you've got the Home Office that's saying, well, we want to get rid of the people who are already here, let alone the people who might come over and fill those vacancies. None of it joins up. It's a massive error of judgment, in my view, to be treating people like this. In particular, and I said this in Prime Minister's Question Time just before Christmas, it might be an unfashionable thing to say, but I don't think it's particularly British to change the rules halfway through the game. When somebody has come to this country thinking that they had a set of rules to abide by, they're abiding by those rules, and then we change those rules halfway through and say, no, you're not wanted anymore. I don't think that's fair, and I don't think we should be pursuing that, and that's going to come before Parliament in the rest of this year, and I think we'll be having more sort of fights and battles over that. The other 2 points on the problems I just want to quickly move into before I talk about the National Care Service. There's a massive lack of support out there for families who are trying to traverse what is a very difficult landscape when it comes to social care. Unless you've had a background in it and you understand how it works, it's complicated. The funding is complicated. Trying to understand what you're entitled to is complicated. Local authorities don't really have the support in place for people. If you're not articulate and confident in what it is you're asking for, you're on your own largely. People find it difficult to get someone to advocate on their behalf. And if you don't understand it yourself and you can't read up about it, you're completely lost, I think. So there's a real lack of support for families, and that needs to be addressed in any system going forward. And then, of course, the key one that came up during various elections, particularly the May election, when Theresa May was a Prime Minister, I think it was 2017, was the death tax argument, and in particular the thing about people having to sell their homes. Now, that's been the case for a long time. People have had to sell their homes to pay for care rather than us fund it through general taxation or some other form of taxation. And that absolutely has to be addressed, which brings me on to the National Care Service. I think we could start by taking back domiciliary care when those contracts with local authorities come up for renewal. This is exactly the same model that the Labour government is using in terms of railway companies, where their contractors come to an end. SWR is the one in my region. It was the first one to be taken back into public ownership. Its contract came to an end and the government said, well, we now own this and it's under Great British Rail. We could do the same with contracts that local government have got with domiciliary care providers. This is what we used to call home helps in the old days, but broadly speaking, it's people who go into your home and help you with your care needs. That's one way we could start to take it back into public ownership very quickly. Longer term, we obviously need to look more seriously at how care homes can be brought back into public ownership. That is a bit more tricky, and I accept that is a more longer term aim that we need to have. But what I would say is this: you can't have, in my view, a publicly funded national care service, if we move to an NHS model of general taxation for funding this, and then find all that public money going into the private sector because they're the ones who are running the homes. We have to say that the public money needs to go into a public sector care system rather than a private sector one. So there's a massive contradiction. If we can't sort out the ownership and the model of who provides the care that you get, then we're really saying that the taxpayer is just funding the private sector ad nauseum forever. And I don't think that's, in the short term, that might be where we have to be, but in the longer term, that really isn't the right place to end up. So I'm going to end on this. We have to acknowledge, I think, that nothing much is going to happen in this Parliament because we blew that whole agenda with the Casey review and kicked it all into touch. So really, this is a next Parliament issue that we need to be gearing up for. One of the things I'll be arguing for inside the Labour Party before the manifesto is that a national care service goes into that manifesto as a commitment, and that we flesh out some of the detail as to how we're going to do that practically, like taking back domiciliary care early and working out a better model for public ownership of the actual homes themselves, because we have to argue that that's the only way to provide the sort of care that we want. If we want to professionalise the care that people get, if we want it to be of a higher standard, if we want the workers to get paid well and be properly trained, we have to professionalise the care service rather than see it as just something that happens and it's low paid workers, low skilled workers, which I don't think for 1 minute that that's the case. But if that's where we leave it, then the workers are going to be treated badly, the people who are needing the care are going to be treated badly, and the only ones really benefiting are the private care operators. And I don't think that's where we want our society to be. So I hope I've done all that in 7 minutes. I don't know whether I have, Gilda, or not, but hopefully that's been helpful perspective.
That's extremely helpful. And can I just clarify, you're going to be able to stay for over half an hour, Neil?
I'm afraid not, no.
Okay, well, I'm going to
lots of business I've
undo
got
what
to get
I
onto.
said and ask if we could take 2 or 3 quick questions now or respond.
Yeah, of course. If
Would
it's
that be okay? Because
yeah.
you won't be there when people want to chip in.
Of
So is there
course.
anybody burning to come back on Neil at this point? I've got Joe Walton and somebody else. So Joe, do you want to just quickly come back on that? Joe Walton, Rosie Reed, and
hello.
the other two.
I just want to point out that we're talking basically about social care here, but in actual fact, continuing healthcare is in the same kind of crisis, because continuing healthcare is delivered by exactly the same companies who are delivering social care. The only difference is that the people who receive it are not charged for it, but the resulting quality of care and the rationing of it is just as dire. So I think we need to think about this national care service across the whole, not just in terms of social care and knocking social care out of kind of the paid side of it. That's me.
Thank you. Just a quick comment from Rosie Reed, who's just
And Colin
will give a plug for her book.
Yes, and Colin Baston wants
Baston, yeah, I can see him.
Thank you, Gilda. No, I wouldn't dream of trying to plug my book on this occasion. Hi, Neil. Thank you very much for that great talk. And I agree with everything you've said. Also, very much agree with what Joe just said about thinking about social care in that broader sense. And perhaps on that note as well, I would ask what you would say to organisations and groups and movements like ESCAD. So you've talked a lot about what the government should do. How can groups like ESCAD make sure, what should we do over and above perhaps what we're already doing to make sure that we hold government's feet to the fire and make sure that they deliver on social care? I've been in ESCAD talks before like this where John McDonnell's talked about creating a kind of social rights movement around social care. So from a bottom-up perspective, what needs to happen?
Can I just can you hang on to that for a minute, Neil, and ask Colin Bastin to come in?
Thank you. Yes, it's wonderful that we have a movement here going for social care, and all our stars are aligning this year. We have put forward from my constituency a motion for Labour Party conference, and Dame Sally Powell has is organising a fringe meeting on the Sunday of conference in Liverpool. And thirdly, we have a stand that I'm managing at conference to encourage people to come and talk to us about social care. It's wonderful that we have so many actions to promote adult social care. If Hammersmith and Fulham Borough Council can do it 10 years ago, then other councils around the country can do it as well. So I welcome Neil and his contribution to this discussion, and I think it was wonderful. So keep up the good work, Neil. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. I'd just like to bring in one more because I see Marianne is speaking later, and I'm sure Mike will come in later. But Chris Wade, would you like to just come in before we move on? I don't want to get us too bogged in questions. Chris?
Basically, I'd like to make a point. I'm a sibling carer. I've also worked in the adult social care system since '86. So unfortunately, I'm one of those that see both sides of the fence. Neil raised the point about people coming in from outside the country, and if they don't play the game, they get bullied and all the rest of it. If a member of staff of adult social care raise a concern regarding abuse, they are bullied by a private sector, national care company. They are also bullied by social workers. The culture of not listening to families needs to change. If professionals listen to families, the frustration of families will stop. The work-related stress that professionals have to operate within on a daily basis will reduce. Sickness rates will drop. People will work in a better environment. It's a win-win situation that will save this country thousands of pounds. But the real winner isn't the families, isn't me, isn't the professionals, but the real winner are the people that we fight for every single day. In my case, I've been fighting for my sister since September 1970, and I continue to fight today.
Thank you, Chris. Can we leave it at that, Chris?
Thank you.
Thank you. That was really good, and you've made it very personal. Just want to give Neil a quick chance to come back, and particularly on what can we do to hold the Labour Party and other parties' feet to the fire to see that something happens, because we all share his frustration. And whether he wants to comment at all about Labour conference as key things. I think the others were more contributions and questions, maybe.
Yeah. I mean, Joe's point on continuing healthcare is correct. I mean, we shouldn't see social care as a sort of separate anyway to healthcare, in my view. So, I mean, I absolutely agree that we should see it as a sort of single line. So I wasn't trying to say that it's over here and something else is over there. I mean, I very much believe that health and social care are connected and you can't disentangle the two. In fact, let's be clear, you won't fix some of the NHS problems until you fix social care. And I think that's another reason why the government was wrong not to look at social care at first, because we've done quite a lot in government to talk about modernising the NHS, bringing it into the community. Well, the fact is, we know that the community don't work at the moment. You only need to look at social care in the community to know that it's a system that isn't working. So actually, there was a mistake there, that if you want to fix one, you have to fix the other, because they are interrelated. So I take on board Joe's point absolutely. In terms of Chris's point about the impact on individuals, my father, before he died, was in a care home for 18 months, more or less, with dementia. So I saw at very close hand how difficult the job is to look after somebody who can't remember who they are or what's going on, or anything around their surroundings. And that does require staff to feel secure in their role, properly remunerated in that role, and feel that they have a sense of purpose. If they just think that they're doing that job because it's the only job they can get, or they can't get a job anywhere else, or no one will hire them, and you could get more money working in Tesco's, that's not a profession. And I don't think we can rely on some of the lowest paid workers in our society to do some of the most challenging work for our loved ones. I think that we've got this all wrong if we think that that's the way we're going to build a sort of better care system. So improving, professionalising, raising standards inside the sector includes improving workers' conditions, and that includes their pay and so on and so forth. Now, the government have introduced in the Employment Rights Act a pay negotiating body for social care. I think that's a step forward. It will set rates for the sector. I think that's an improvement in where we've been, as opposed to individual pay bargaining. It will be sector-wide pay bargaining. I think that's positive. But the sector's largely ununionised, to be honest, despite the best efforts of UNISON and GMB, and we need to, that needs to change as well. And the Employment Rights Act will give unions the rights to go into workplaces and try and organise. So there's some things in the background that might assist, but longer term, we do definitely have to professionalise the sector. And then the final thing is about how we lobby, whether it be at conference or, as Rosie said, sort of a social movement. One of the things I would say, as a new MP who's been an MP for 2 years, one of the things that makes the most impact is the contact that MPs have with their constituents. It sounds like a hoary old chestnut and a bit of a cliche, but it is correct. Because I've heard MPs talk about this in the past, and I thought, I bet it doesn't make any difference. It does. I can tell you as an MP, it does make a difference. If you get lots of people writing you saying, will you go to this meeting? Will you put this question forward? Will you speak in this debate? Will you sign this petition? Will you sign this motion? Or whatever it might be. And you get enough people in your constituency to ask you to do that, it will tip over. You're not going to convince every MP, of course not. But you might get more people involved that you haven't got involved already. So all those sorts of things, giving them questions that they can ask, suggested contributions that they make to debates, amendments to pieces of legislation that MPs can get behind and put down, all of those sort of practical things about how Parliament works is one of the ways you can get MPs on board. Now, John McDonnell was quite right. You're not just going to win everything in Parliament. It needs to be a movement outside that supports those inside who are making those sort of legal and changes to legislation. And people have confidence to do that in Parliament when they know there's people outside who are also saying the same things and backing them up. So yes, we need to organise, whether it be in the unions, and connect those social care workers with people who are being cared for and their families. That needs to be done, and that needs to be connected also with politicians who can then go out and advocate. So it's not down to one group to do this. We've got to have a collective voice in doing this, and I think there are some practical ways that I've tried to explain that could be done.
Lovely. Well, thanks so much, Neil, and we're really pleased you spared us this amount of time, and we're clearly on a very similar page, and hope we can work together a bit more closely in the future. So without more ado, so there's lots of claps going on and appreciation.
Thanks very much.
Thank you, and it'll be interesting to see what's happened tomorrow. I
Bye-bye.
just want to move on to Alisoun Milne. We're very pleased to have her here. Alisoun's got a slideshow. She is I think is it Emerita professor as for a
It is actually, Gilda, so thank you for challenging me
yes,
before I've
yes,
even started.
at Kent University, and she's going to talk on the neoliberal market and harms to older people, because as you know, one of the big obstacles we see to us making progress rapidly is neoliberalism, and that's a very big elephant. Okay.
Thanks so much for inviting me, Gilda, and really nice to see everybody. I think what I'm going to be saying is sort of building actually on some of the points that Neil was making. What I'm going to be talking about is actually in a paper. So the paper is in press, it's not published yet. So by necessity, I've been obliged to sort of reduce a bit on the detail, because otherwise we would be here for sort of a good 45 minutes. So Finn, I'm hoping you're going to be popping up with my slides. Is he there, Gilda?
He will be, yeah.
Brilliant, excellent, thank you very much. Right, so this is what I'm going to be talking about. And this is the same name as the paper, which is in press at the moment in a journal called Social Policy and Administration. My credentials, just for those who are interested, are that I was a social worker for some years and a team manager, and I was in academia for a long time, both teaching social work students and doing research. And I've done quite a lot of research with family carers, about long-term care, about social work, and about mental health in later life. So those are the 4 areas I would claim some expertise in. I'm particularly interested actually in hearing from this group, this audience, about what I've got to say. So let me press on. Next slide. I feel like Chris Whitty. Next slide, please. So we've heard a bit from Neil already that, I mean, the neoliberalism is the sort of default logic for welfare policy now in the UK, and actually in wider Europe as well. In fact, they're kind of slightly behind us or ahead of us, depending on your viewpoint. We know that at least 85% of care homes, for example, are in the for-profit sector, and increasingly they are owned by larger corporations that have absolutely no links with the UK at all, sort of hedge funds in the Cayman Islands, this sort of thing. Whilst the damaging consequences for older people relating to market failure, to some extent they are recognised, but the cause is often conceptualised as the failure of a single provider, or occasionally a chain, like Southern Cross, for example. The market model itself is not scrutinised in the same way or seen to be the problem. It is the individual care home or home care provider that is viewed as the problem. So the role of marketisation of social care in creating social harms to older people, which is what I'm going to be talking about, is underexplored and politically challenging and quite slippery actually to get hold of. I think myself and Denise Tanner, who was my colleague who wrote the paper with me and did the work behind the paper, we think it's important for 2 reasons. Older people are the majority users of residential and community-based care services, social care services, and healthcare services, actually, to pick on the earlier point. And the outsourcing of care provision to the market is viewed as a major contributor to the current crisis of care. So there are 2 sort of headline issues there. Our key risk. So the market model comes with an inbuilt default risk, which is the consequence of market failure. So market failure is part and parcel of relying on the market to provide care. Care ruptures, disruptions of care that result from care market failure, cause harms that are both foreseeable and preventable. Those are our key arguments. Next slide, please. So there are 2 interrelated dimensions of market fragility that generate care ruptures: financial instability of care organisations and the precarity of the workforce. We've heard a little bit about the workforce but from Neil earlier. So just thinking about care homes, higher number of care homes closed due to funding constraints and market-related predatory practices such as debt leverage buyouts. Some of this language, by the way, is new to me as well. It basically means people buying care homes in order to then sell them on for profit. So more and more of this is happening in the care home market, the care home sector. We know that 8,000 care homes in England closed between 2011 and 2023, and between 11 and 13, 816 care homes were subject to enforced closure. Now, that enforced closure, by the way, is imposed by the Care Quality Commission when they think a care home is not providing care that is safe. And between that time, the 860 homes led to 20,000 residents having to be found new placements at short notice by the local authority. There is no penalty for higher risk taking by private sector organisations, since it's the local authority who bears responsibility for ensuring that older people's needs are met in the event of market failure or wreck. In other words, it's the local authority that has to pick up the tab once in instances where the market fails. The other dimension of market fragility is the workforce. Low profitability has direct consequences for pay and conditions. Neil's already talked about that, and precarious employment. We know that the care sector is characterised by chronic staff shortages, vacancy rates are very high, and it's worse in private providers, amongst private providers. And it's a no-brainer for me to be telling this audience that undermines continuity and quality of care and increases risk of abuse. And it's interesting to hear from Neil that the care home workforce itself is often the subject of abuse and neglect, you could argue. Next slide, please. So in terms of, you're saying, you might be thinking, what's she talking when she talks about social harm? So in our work, we use Pemberton's definition of social harm, which has 4 dimensions: physical harm, mental, emotional harm, autonomy, and relational harm. And we drew on evidence from our recent research relating to disruptions in home care and disruptions in care home provision, so the 2 main sectors. Now, the closure of a care home that an older person believed would be their home for life creates high levels of emotional distress. Again, you might say a bit obvious, really, but especially a problem when it's unplanned, and it breaches a number of kind of moral expectations, if you like, that the home would be permanent. When admitted to a care home, older people and their families believe that is going to be that older person's home for life. Enforced emergency closures are the most distressing, as these tend to occur in situations deemed to pose serious risk to health and well-being, requiring residents to be moved at very short notice. In one example, older people were relocated to temporary accommodation late in the evening in their night clothes with their belongings hastily packed into bin bags. I mean, it's scandalous, frankly. Even in planned closures, lack of time to prepare physically and psychologically is damaging both to older people and their families, and of course staff. Whether the older person has dementia, their age, length of residency, and the notice period disrupting well-being and quality of life. We had one example of an older woman with her new care home. She fractured her hip, went into hospital for 4 weeks, and her cognitive and physical health was really permanently damaged by that experience. Next slide, please.
Alisoun, I think that's all I've got in terms of slides. It stops at 4, is that correct?
Oh.
Is the sound breaking up, or is it just me?
No, we're losing.
We're losing Alisoun.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
On and
Okay,
off, I'm afraid, Alisoun.
Oh dear.
Well, you're back now. You're coming and you're breaking up a little bit.
I'm sorry about the slides. I've certainly got about 4 more, but let me just carry on without the slide, actually. So the second slide was going to be about social harms in older people relating to the care home sector. So in the care home sector, older people face care ruptures arising from staff shortages and high staff turnover. Receiving support from a range of care workers can often create misunderstandings and miscommunication, for example, around mistakes around medication and poor catheter management. And of course, care workers who visit for tiny little portions of task-focused time have no time to build up relationships with that older person, understand their needs, or get to know them, which is not only what matters to the older person, but is related directly to quality of care. Disruptions arising from workers failing to arrive at the contracted time may lead to loss of dignity due to the older person failing to get to the toilet, for example, missed medical appointments, or opportunities for social contact and meals. For example, there's an older woman who was waiting for her care worker to turn up. They were late. She wasn't ready for the bus then to take her to her day centre. The day centre was where she met her friends. She had social contact, but she also had her one nutritious meal of the day. The so-called care consumer, even if they are a self-funder, has no influence over whether or when a care agency closes or how that closure is managed. Choice is also constrained by whether a local market exists. There are care deserts now, many of them in the UK, particularly in rural areas and deprived areas. There's no point, even if you've got money, if there is no provider out there for you to buy your services from, it's a pointless concept, having choice. You haven't got any. It is profoundly harmful to older people, especially those living with dementia, to lose trust relationships with familiar staff. It is one of the most important dimensions of good quality care, promoting health and well-being and confidence around intimate and personal care in particular. I mean, we had some horror stories about the number of staff, changes of staff. I mean, touching your body, you know, it's very important to have a sense of trust and confidence in someone who's coming in to deliver personal care. Next slide, please. So I've got 2 more slides. What can be done about this? So we conclude that the concept of care rupture and its link with social harm exposes the intrinsic incompatibility of market-based delivery of safe, sustainable care for older people. Harmful care ruptures are not random misfortune, which I think is often how they're presented, or just lack of luck or whatever, rather than issues that are actually preventable. They are almost sanctioned as the necessary cost of achieving the delivery of care via the market. Whilst care ruptures do occur in the public sector, before someone challenged me and says they don't occur, yes, they do. Marketised care is intrinsically precarious. That is the key point. Acknowledging the damaging consequences of marketised care on older people demands a shift away from fixing temporary malfunctions towards a much broader critique of the system in some places. Now, the case of myself,
we're losing you
particularly
again,
confident about this,
Alison.
but I think we have to hope. Oh, sorry, I'm saying the Casey Commission may hold some promise, so let's at least hope it. I'm not sure whether it will or not. There is some potential to increase the contribution of often smaller not-for-profit providers. Partly it's stepping up, of course, because the for-profit sector doesn't make any money out of this group of people, actually. So sometimes it's forced to, but in some places it's a choice. And we need stronger regulation for the for-profit sector to curb risky and harmful, sometimes deliberately risky and harmful financial practices. Last slide, please.
Can we zoom through it a little bit? Oh,
Yes, of course. So the second shift we are arguing, I think we need to think about and make. Sorry, not that one. Foregrounding. Sorry, I'm going to have to. I think it's my internet connection that's causing the problem, Gilda. Sorry about that. Foregrounding what matters to older people when managing responses to care ruptures. What we prioritise at the moment is safety and money. We don't prioritise protecting the relationships that matter to older people in terms of care home closures. Thinking about embedding human rights protections for older people into policy making and planning for care services, the construction of care as an economic commodity for people who know this only too well. The current model particularly disadvantages those least equipped to act as autonomous, independent individuals older people who are living with advanced dementia and care home residents. There's also a role for strengthening older people's mandatory rights to care and support during care ruptures. At the moment, you may or may not you certainly don't get consistent support from, say, social workers or advocates. A minimum period of notice regarding service closure. We had examples where care homes were closing in weeks and the local authority knew about this but weren't allowed to tell the families or the residents because it was commercially not the for-profit agencies who provide it. That's it.
Thanks,
Thank you
Alisoun.
very much for listening.
Thank you very much. We have gone on a little bit, a bit of that to do with the the crackling as well. But that's really really good and really certainly very much in line with our thinking and quite a lot of ideas of what we should be doing and what we should be pursuing, which is great. We're going to try and get through the next three fairly quickly, I hope, but they're very important because we're looking at, practical and lived experience on the ground and things people are doing and challenges that people are facing. So Gordon Peters is going to talk to us. He's an ex-director of social care, a strong stalwart of Social Care Disgrace campaign, one of the original members. And I think it's best to let him tell you what happened to him and where he's taking that, because he never sits down and stops working. He's always challenging and resisting.
Thank you, Gilda. I hope the sound's all right, is it? Yeah? Yeah. Thanks. Well, I'm going to move very quickly from the general to the particular, but to a much neglected one, mild cognitive impairment. Completely in agreement with most, if not everything that's been said so far, and particularly Alisoun's points on there's no short-term profit in preventive work. And what I'm going to talk about is really an area of much needed preventive work, which is not of any financial interest to most of these big private providers. So, I mean, it's fundamental what Alisoun's just been talking about and how social care has become so skewed. So mild cognitive impairment is a recognized health condition, but remarkably little discussed, researched, or written about, either in general or by medical and associated professionals. It's a decline in brain functioning mainly, but not only with aging. The symptoms being memory loss, particularly of recent events, not just occasional, and it can affect spatial awareness and may vary considerably by individual. Mild cognitive impairment, or MCI for short, is diagnosed often following a GP referral to a community mental health clinic by an assessment process, including written and spoken responses to questionnaires, reaction times to stimuli, and dialogue with professionals. It affects at least as many, but probably more than dementia, and can be a precursor to dementia. It does not, however, necessarily lead to dementia. One current reckoning is that possibly 50% of cases it's likely to lead on to full dementia. In the borough where I live, there are 2,600 people with dementia, the best estimate, and it's assumed at least as many with MCI, though only several hundred are currently known to the NHS. That equates to 1% of the population with dementia and the same number with MCI. And that could be generalised across the country, I think. I don't think Haringey is peculiar. MCI then is clearly an area for preventive work to be focused. In fact, an article in the Lancet in 2024, in fact, a huge issue with many different presentations on dementia, estimated that 40% of cases of people developing full dementia could be prevented. 40% of dementia is preventable, according to the best medical estimates, if there were much earlier intervention. Yet, such services exist in a very hard-pressed NHS, and local authorities are concentrated, quite understandably, on people dealing with full-scale dementia. The Alzheimer's Society, notwithstanding their name and campaigning record, are one organisation which has done most to highlight preventive work, in fact, and the daily living steps which can either delay or, where possible, prevent dementia. So I commend their publications for anyone interested, and for the biology and physical and neurological research on dementia, limiting its spread. Professor Frank Gunn Moore is another good source. And there's a recent article in The Guardian on the 9th of June by Anne Karpf. 3 points from that which are worth stressing. People with dementia diagnosed can still lead full and active lives. Secondly, the stigma effect is particularly shocking in some ways, in that it leads to the withdrawal of an awful lot of other people from the lives of the person with dementia rather than the alternative. The stigma effect is very, very significant. People tend to walk away and don't want to know. And thirdly, there are new neural pathways which can be diagnosed as either mild cognitive impairment or, in fact, developing dementia. The brain actually compensates in amazing ways, and a lot of the medical research which is now being done gives a lot of hope for that. So all the more reason to say that people with or at risk of dementia are not to be paternalistically written off into a category of we'll give them the best support we can, but actually preventive work is vital. In Haringey, one or two of us with MCI and connecting with others who may be on the cusp of it, approached the council's dementia coordinator and then the leading NHS consultant at the St Anne's Community Mental Health Trust with a view to setting up a local support group. There are pre-existing groups for people with dementia and carers, with which the borough is quite well served, in fact, but there was nothing relating to MCI or specifically preventive work because there's no money in it. The idea was to be a self-supporting peer group with professional input as and when necessary, and formally recognised within the NHS and the local authority partnership structures. So we did get an enthusiastic response from these professionals mentioned, and the consultant said she could adapt from a reading group she had going in her neighbouring borough, Barnet. So we're now co-producing an MCI support group, which will meet weekly at a local centre during July, and then, depending on availability, demand and willingness, arrange a further timetable with some professional experts in the field lined up to contribute and set locations. And the chair of the Joint Partnership Board locally for Health and Social Care Matters has given her imprimatur, and we have a voice on the local dementia reference group about raising awareness for people who may have a precursor to dementia and what families, relatives, friends can do. So it's a brief story about getting a significant health and social need recognised and the intervention co-produced locally. Professionals, people with diagnosed issues and their supporters on an equal level, tackling a stigma or just plain fear of which stops people getting support, and prizing out willing experts and professionals to work closely as equivalent people on a local solution. And it surprised me, even given I've been around a long time, something like almost 60 years now in social services, from basic grade to being a professional, then a director and a consultant. It really surprised me how the professionals, when we approached them, came out of their shells and said, yes, we must do something about this. And it's great that local people can be involved, and they actually do want to co-produce it with us. So it's just a question of sort of recognising, getting a grip of the issue, and realising that preventive work is what will actually make the big difference. And that's the one, of course, in which there's no money, by and large, being invested, because everything about the privately dominated healthcare system is about profit making. It's not about prevention. So I think co-production of people working to defer mild cognitive impairment, to get support for it, and to increase the research available on it is vital. And I think we're sort of beginning to demonstrate, hopefully in North London, because there seems quite a lot of interest in this. We've already got a dozen people interested in our group who weren't before, that we can really make headway with this. So when for now that's my contribution. I can talk about any of the issues or any of the sort of more medicalized points about what are the risk factors if anybody wants to.
That's fantastic. Thank you very much, Gordon. That's a great example of grassroots action, challenging, working at local level and challenging all the way up to the top to change the whole narrative around dementia. Thank you, Gordon. I'm sure people will come back later, but I want to whoosh on to Marianne, who's another grassroots activist. Well, she does a lot of other things, but she is going to tell us a little bit about the struggle she's had over care for her father and the pointers that gives us to what needs to be different. And if you can try and keep yours short, that'd be great, Marianne. Thanks.
Thank you. I just want to check, can everybody hear me okay?
Yeah.
Beautifully.
Okay, lovely. Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you so much for this opportunity to tell my father's story. One of the main ways my father's voice and his needs have been dismissed is by writing off deteriorations in his health as inevitable consequences of aging. This first happened just under 6 years ago when my father underwent a routine operation that involved general anaesthetic. He went into the hospital as a completely independent 87-year-old man who was still driving his car and volunteering at church. When he returned from the hospital, his cognition had declined to such an extent he couldn't make a cup of tea or put on a shirt without assistance. This state persisted for many months, and he never returned to anywhere near his preoperative self. I can never be certain what happened to my father. My theory is he suffered long-term effects of general anaesthetic, but part of what shocked me the most is that despite not being mentioned at any of the pre-op appointments, when I explained what had happened, clinicians freely told me this was relatively common in those over 80, but there was no real treatment and nothing they could do. I still remember the incredibly cold and disinterested way the GP told me, sometimes that happens. I think this one incident, it highlights something about the way decline is treated as an inevitability. Surely if the effect is this common, why is there no warning for people undergoing surgery? And why is there not research into the causes of this effect in the hope that there could one day be treatments? And it's true that growing older and eventually dying are two of the few things in life we can really be certain of. But isn't pretty much all of medicine about fighting back against situations that would otherwise be inevitable? I mean, it's inevitable that somebody would feel pain when a scalpel cuts their skin. It doesn't mean we don't give them anaesthetic. Fortunately, my father was able to recover a little, and his health continued relatively stable until he suffered a fall in December 2022. This took him into a local hospital where he contracted COVID-19 and sadly joined another group of people who were routinely ignored, those with long COVID or similar conditions such as ME. Before infection, my father was well enough to climb the stairs in his house and sit in his garden chatting with friends for about 2 hours. For several months after infection, he was virtually bedbound and needed to sleep somewhere between 23 and 20 hours per day. His cognition was now so damaged he could no longer use an alert pendant, and that meant it wasn't safe to leave him alone for long periods anymore. Again, I sought help. The GP referred me to a geriatric assessment centre instead of a long COVID clinic. The doctor at the assessment centre looked at Dad's blood tests and said, "There's nothing wrong with him, he just needs to join more social groups." I tried to get Dad referred to the long COVID clinic again, and he was refused because the doctors believed the heart conditions, which he had suffered from for years prior to COVID, explained his symptoms. And now this clinic, like most other NHS long COVID clinics, has closed. Sadly, it was at this time that my father's voice was also drowned out by another voice, that of greed, when the care company we had been using realised they could make more money by sponsoring visas for overseas workers and then leaving these workers in jobs they clearly did not have the training to do. Just to give an example, we had 3 people in the space of 1 week who couldn't make Dad a cup of tea or a piece of toast. And it's at this point I just need to put 2 things beyond any doubt. Firstly, I have no issue with anyone coming to the UK to do much needed work. My issue is with not giving these people proper training to do that work and with the way these people are often exploited and find themselves in some form of modern slavery. And secondly, I didn't realise at the time that people on sponsorship visas could be paid less than other workers, or they could be charged huge sums to get these visas. I didn't know that until quite a lot later. We were able to move to a new care company, and that was much better, but my dad's savings were quickly diminishing, so I turned to 2 sources of potential funding, the local authority and CHC funding. I often joke that the needs assessment from the local authority is the least listened to or understood I have ever felt in my life. And believe me, coming from me, that's particularly bad because I teach maths and science for a living. But the way the social worker refused to listen to me or Dad's carers and insisted he visit a day centre and would be safe to be left alone overnight does represent a particular low point during this process. I fought back against the council, who agreed Dad needed 24-hour care. However, they would only fund the same cost as the cheapest local care home. This facility was rated as not always safe when the decision was made, and now it's on special measures. I went to my dad's GP, hoping he might try and help Dad get the care he needs from the council. He refused to even try, saying the council would never listen to him. Meanwhile, the same social worker who carried out the assessment from the council participated in Dad's CHC funding meeting. She, her boss, and a nurse assessor who had never met my father decided he did not qualify for CHC funding. I kept fighting the council. I argued how unsafe it would be for Dad to be moved to a care home due to the risks of reinfection and due to the way an unfamiliar and noisier communal environment would exacerbate the still severe fatigue he suffers. The council deemed that this was a medical need and thus beyond what they can fund, but refused to even attempt to obtain partial CHC funding to meet his need. I appealed the CHC decision, which involved me spending around 1 hour explaining Dad's situation and why a care home was unsafe and unsuitable. Somehow, this led to Dad being awarded funded nursing care, which is a type of funding that will cover a small proportion of the cost of a nursing home, but only if you are in a nursing home. I've made complaints to adult social care. I've spoken to local government officials, MPs, to everyone I can think of. Either they've ignored me, or if they have tried to help me and Dad, they've been ignored themselves. And over, I hear the same message, that it's inevitable that an elderly person will end up in residential care, and if that facility is found to be not always safe, it's no big deal. Fortunately, though, my dad is still at home. I'm determined to keep him there and maintain him in the best possible quality of life for as long as possible. But perhaps just for the final bit of my time talking this evening, I could share some of the happier things about my father, so I stop his voice being completely hidden. I would like to tell people that his voice is still filled with kindness and courtesy in the way he says, "Thank you, ladies," whenever his carers help him. To tell people about the wonderful and utterly bizarre conversations he has in his sleep. "I've got a pillow, I've got a spoon, I'm going to be fine." And to tell people that even after everything, his voice still resonates with laughter and singing almost every day. Please don't let his voice and those of so many like him be lost.
That's amazing. Marianne, thanks so much. That's really powerful, and also a testament, though, to the importance of fighting all along the way and trying to get a better service for everybody and trying to get those voices heard. Thank you very much. And lastly, I think I'm delighted to see, I think Dave Jenkins is here. He's Councillor Jenkins from Leeds, from where I am, and he's chair of the Leeds Age-Friendly Steering Group, I think. He's dashed from another meeting. I'm sorry, David, we're running slightly oddly because we normally take all the questions at the end, but we took some after Duncan Jordan's contribution because he had to leave. So we've split it up a bit. We're still hoping to get at least 20 minutes of comments from the floor. So you can just briefly give us some idea of what the other initiative you're doing, not it is kind of grassroots, but it's across the council, another initiative of changing things at local level. That would be wonderful. Thanks very much.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, having to cope with a new Reform councillor who's homophobic and nasty as well. Still, that's why I'm still in the council committee room. So thank you very much for asking me to speak. Well, I'm going to be very, very brief because I've sent Gilda a lot of material, which hopefully she'll be able to share with you. So I'm actually chair of the Age Friendly Board, which meets about 4 times a year. And as part of that, we have an Age Friendly Steering Group, which has, with the Centre for Ageing Better, we've made a short video about the work that they undertake. And the Age Friendly Steering Group is very much about lived experience and independent living. And what they've done recently is go into the railway station to look at access for older people and people with disabilities, and into the St James's Hospital to look at access for older people and people with disabilities. So it's really important that those sorts of insights are carried forward and inspire the institutions to change, really, even though there's not very much money to change. In Leeds, we've got probably a very good service because we've been in control 14 or 16 years probably as a Labour authority, in spite of austerity and so on. And in many ways we've done quite well. apart from SEND provision. But we've actually got 4 extra care homes, which are quite brilliant. They each have about 60 residents, and it's all local authority run. And so one is Gascoigne House, which is in Middleton, which you could Google. It's got a rooftop terrace, and it is an age-friendly community in itself, really. So it's, you know, affordable within whatever affordable means nowadays. But there's 4 of them, and you know, so I think it's a real antidote to the costs of people going into care. So I was sat in my garden this afternoon trying to recover from pneumonia, and one of the local residents came along with her mother in the wheelchair from the local care home, saying, "How on earth can I afford £3,000 a month?" And she said the care was appalling and not very good. So I did suggest that, you know, moving to a different care home, and which she'll probably will do. So I think finally to say that I'd recommend the Housing Lynn, Tony Watt's later life agenda, and the Centre for Aging Better as a sort of daily record, really, of things that are important for older people. We've been campaigning along with other people for an older person's commissioner, which I think would do a lot for England, because there is a commissioner in Wales and in Northern Ireland. And I think we need some sort of commissioner to, you know, to monitor really what the Casey Commission is going to end up with, and also perhaps influence that commission. So lots of really good things that I've heard in the brief time I've been with you. So I'll stop there.
Okay, thank you very much. That's great. And I think we've got Steve Lancashire here as well, who is also involved in Southwark with the age-friendly communities, might want to come in. But it gives us a bit of a feel across the board of people trying to push against the current system that demeans and neglects older people and is through and through with ageism. So I'm just going to ask people now if they would like to come in. They can do questions or they can make a short contribution, but if you can try and do it in a couple of minutes. Now we've got over 20 minutes, we can get a number of people in. So if you just raise your hand, I'll try and go through as they come up. And if I think I've got first David Jones, then Anne Gray, then Mike Hope and Colin Bastin. So David Jones, can you unmute David?
Mute, unmuted. Right, thank you. Very
Hello,
quickly,
David.
it's to David. David, is your group part of the World Health Age-Friendly Cities? Because I helped set up the Nottingham one, and as you were saying, the age-friendly cities, which gives us direct access into the local councils where we can have quite a lot of influence. Thank you.
And to answer that, come straight back on that.
Yes, yeah, we are part of the World Health Organization remit. Yeah, really good.
Thank you. I've got Anne Gray next. Anne, are you there?
Hi. Just really a question and a comment for Alisoun. I'm aware that, you know, getting rid of the market is basically not the only thing that we need to do. Or getting rid of the predatory market, shall I say, the profit-making market. Because let's face it, local government finance is incredibly insecure. And when I was researching the various forms of care provision, which are not-for-profit, public sector, cooperative, micro-enterprise, and so on, a few months ago, I came across 2 or 3 local authorities that had closed their care homes because of lack of money.
Yeah.
And in our own local authority, which Gordon shares as well, Haringey, there was an appalling situation where, first of all, residents fought long and hard to keep a certain home open because it was the last one that the local authority actually owned. finally got some agreement that it would be refurbished and expanded, and a co-produced plan that took about 2 years to come to fruition and be ready for the architects and the financial people to work on, was then abandoned after all that work by co-producing residents because of local authority lack of central government money. So until we have enough central government money to fund the care sector properly, I think everything, even if it's publicly owned, is precarious. I just really wanted to make that point. And
I agree.
has any
I
comment.
agree. Yeah, of course. As Neil said at the start, I completely agree with that.
Right. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah.
Okay, I'll take a few more contributions and we'll give some of the speakers a chance to come back. Mike Hope.
Right,
I'm spotlighted. Can we spotlight Mike? Oh, there he is. Yeah.
This is a question for all speakers, really. A few days ago, there was a judgment that sort of filtered through from the Supreme Court, which seemed to me to be really, really worrying, which is a loosening of the deprivation of liberty safeguards. Now, those have been in place for people who are in different forms of residential or hospital care and who are deemed to generally lack mental capacity, but to ensure that they are not abused. Now, I do not actually understand why the High Court thought that the terms of this should be loosened, but it sends a really dangerous message for, the people who are already deprived of a voice and in residential care. I actually work organising rehab for people who have acquired brain injury, most of whom are not older people. They are younger people. In some cases, if they get the right kind of rehab, they can make a good recovery. But they, in the interim, their sort of cognitive and behavioral state can vary a great deal. And sometimes people do have to be in a position where where their liberties are restricted for their own interests and for the interests of everybody else. There need to be absolute safeguards. I'm really concerned that safeguards have been taken away.
I completely agree. I think there are, oh God. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. I don't know. Sorry, it's an internet change thing. Anyway, I'm boring. I completely agree. And there's a lot of concern already in the sector. I'm aware of it already, of people just being really worried that it dilutes a whole set of safeguards that will hold authorities to account for decisions made. So yes, I agree. I think it's potentially a human rights issue, but anyway.
The question, though, Alison, is why did they do it?
Well, I think I don't know, but certainly what I have heard is they partly did it because they're under pressure to be. I'm concerned about this because it's a legal judgment, so I'm doubtful about some of the sources, but some people think it's because it's about saving money.
Yeah.
So there's if you're not required to revisit decisions regularly, that's a money-saving device. And I know because some reform councils are delighted about the outcome, which makes me immediately suspicious that this is something that's not in the interest of the people that we are concerned about.
Okay, thank you both, and we do need in ESCAD to look at how we lend our push and support to the fight back against this. I have got Colin Bastin and then Brian Fisher waiting to speak. So Colin, would you like to come in?
Yes, very briefly. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can.
Yes, Colin,
Yeah.
lovely.
Okay, that's good. Yes, so Gordon Brown almost implemented free home care over 10 years ago, and funding was the issue there. And I'm chair of an embryo cooperative in West London, Ealing Care Co-op, and we are seeking to emulate the not just the work done by Hammersmith and Fulham, but also what's going on in Northwest Care Co-op and Equal Care Co-op in Yorkshire. We've worked out that 50 blocked hospital beds is costing the NHS £5 million every year. And that is a frightening statistic. And so we all need to campaign for a joined up funding of free home care between local authorities and the NHS. And I really hope that we can all come behind Baroness Casey and Stephen Kinnock, who can make this happen. Thank you very much.
We agree with you. Sorry, I've unmuted you. We very much agree with you, and thank you very much for saying that. I was going to pass on a comment from Brian about the Labour Party conference, but as Brian's next, I'm sure he can slip that in. Thank you, Brian.
All right, I wasn't going to raise that, but yes, I'll slip something in first. Two things for Colin before I ask the question that I wanted to ask. One is, if you're going to be at conference, is there any way that we could either speak at your meeting or have some of our pamphlets, leaflets, postcards on your table or somewhere? That's the first question for Colin. The other thing for Colin is that on our website, there's a moderately comprehensive document in the section called resources, which gives I think quite a good overview of the economics of transforming social care. So your data about the cost of blocked beds or beds that could be released if social care worked properly is only one of many other savings that would be made if there was an investment in social care. So we try to explain that on our website, and you might find that helpful. But my actual question was for Alisoun, and was really about it would be very helpful for us to be able to make a strong case against the privatization of social care. And I just felt that first of all, it would be helpful to have more numbers, if at all possible. And I don't know if that's in your paper to come, but what proportion of those closures are to do with the crazy financing? And also, I understand the closure cause harms, and the way the staff are treated causes harms. Is there data to actually show that homes that are funded in that way offer poorer care? I've been told elsewhere that there isn't any great difference. So that's a sort of research issue. So I'm just wondering if we had more data, if you had more data on the problems caused by this insane financing of social care, that would be very helpful.
Yes, the short answer is yes and yes for some of those questions, definitely. So why don't you email me, Brian?
I will.
Yeah,
perfect.
We can chat.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, and thanks, Brian. That's really good to raise the finance, pursue the financial issues, which Brian's written a lot about himself for our website. And I've now got Rachel Tomlinson, key disabled activist in ESCAD. Oh, what's
isolated.
I've got a funny screen here.
Someone,
oh, here we
I think that was maybe Finn's home screen you got there.
No, sorry, someone
just,
else is sharing a screen, so I've just stopped them from sharing. I think that's nothing to do with you, is it, Rachel?
Thought it was
No,
AI making its appearance.
No, that's all.
Okay, I've just stopped the person from sharing it who was sharing that. I don't know.
Thanks you. I just wanted to let everybody know that I had the great pleasure of speaking to Dr. Steve Taylor on Tuesday this week for the Keep Our NHS Public podcast. And it's going live tomorrow, I believe. So if you would like to listen out for it, I'm sure it will be shared across all the social media channels. Did you get that?
Yes, was that it, Rachel?
Yeah.
Okay. No, thank you. That's
Just
great.
thank all the speakers and everything,
Yeah, no, well done. Yes.
Yeah.
Band and Rachel did it brilliantly. So I haven't got any other hands up. So if
and to
wait a
thank
minute,
Gilda
John
as
Walton.
well.
Sorry?
And to thank Gilda for her incredible sharing. And
No,
thank
don't
you.
worry about it. What about I've just got Joe Walton wanting to come in. Is that okay? Joe Walton again is one of our leading lights, chair of our carers group in Social Care Disgrace.
That's a very gracious introduction, Gilda, but I really do not feel that I deserve it at the moment. I don't feel like I'm doing enough at all. I just wanted to make the comment really that the whole problem which we seem to be up against at the moment is that the funding for social care seems to be being regarded as a net draw on the government's resources instead of an investment into it. And we know that it is an investment into it. And how on earth can we get the message across to the government that actually investing in social care is investing in the infrastructure of the country, and everything will work better when we have a proper national service for care, support and independent living.
Very succinctly put, Joe. And we've got a few other comments. We've got John Pontis wants to come in, Larry Sanders and Gay Lee, and that's probably going to be it, although if that's okay. If you can just keep it fairly quick, we'll finish around about 8.
I was just going to, first of all, thanks to all the speakers for great talks. Alisoun, I was pretty horrified by what you said about the CQC. I wasn't aware that such things were happening. Do you think the CQC does any good at all in terms of promoting better standards of care, or do you think it's just coming in too late and causing chaos? So what do you think about the CQC?
I think that's a big question. I think over the years, it's become with what you might call the things that aren't desperately important to the quality of care. They're more about sort of numbers of fire extinguishers, which is not to suggest there shouldn't be fire extinguishers in care homes, but things that matter to older people like relationships and consistency and care staff and care and time being spent with them and all that has become less and less of an issue. I mean, there's no pressure at all, as far as I can see, for the CQC to ever say, your studio is just not acceptable, or none of it. It's that I think they're not necessarily aligned with the needs of the people that are using the service. That's, I must say, that is my own personal opinion.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, can I just say I totally agree with that. That it's in my own experience, it's more about nice clean floors, medicine management, safety, which is important, but it's not about care, love and affection and all the kind of things that really matter to people, and independence. I've got Larry and Gay. I know more people are putting their hands up, but we have got to finish at 8. So I was going to take Larry and Gay and finish, but please put stuff in the chat because I will go through the chat. And well, I'm hoping, John, that maybe you will save it as well, because I
think the chat is still restricted. Actually, I was going to put something.
Oh, is it open, the chat?
I've just opened the chat now.
Oh yeah, if we could please put your comments in the chat, because I will then include them in the write-up and you will have contributed. But we'll just take Larry and Gay. Larry, thank you.
Hi. The financial business is even better than people have said. There's quite a bit of work, but if you start from the point of view of what happens when you add an enormous amount of money to put people who work hard for their money, who don't have a lot of money, the main thing they do is they spend it. So if you start by doubling the pay of care workers, and increasing the number by an enormous amount, rather than it being a drain on the society, every time they get paid, they go out and spend it. The people they spend it with pay taxes on that money. They also spend that money. If a government wants to have a prospering society, it needs to get money in the hands of people who will spend it and who are doing something useful. And that is 100% the definition of
Great. Thank you very much, Larry, and nice to see you. And Gailey, I think you've got the final word, another member of the Green Party.
Yes, and I was going to think about plugging something about what the Green Party's doing, but I think this may apply to other councillors as well, and I don't want this to be a party political thing, but I do think the Green Party have got, and many other people have got new councillors who can hopefully breathe a bit more lifeblood and counteract the effects of reform councillors by thinking about what can be done in the meantime, because everything that's been talked about today I think has been brilliant, but it's much longer term, and we need to try to do something to ameliorate the situation now. And if we can, I mean, one of the things that the Social Care Policy Group is trying to do is to try to work out the kinds of things that councillors need to know to challenge aspects of the current system, and use their potential, their power that many new councillors now have to try to at least ameliorate the situation. And I think that's something that maybe people in SCAD can think about doing on a local basis as well. And I'm sorry, it's a bit of a big issue, and I realise I'm bringing it in at the last minute, but just something to think about.
No, that's spot on, Gay. And just to mention that we do have a briefing document for councillors saying what they can do, because although we're fighting for our vision in the long term and a radically reimagined national care support, an independent living service, we are trying to push local authorities to develop the green shoots of reform here and now to pave the way, and also to look at bringing getting rid of charges, as people have mentioned. And we're also trying to resist some of the worst of what's going on. So we are trying to fight on three different fronts, but we do have a paper. I think the first briefing paper is for Green Party councillors, but we're pursuing Labour as well. So I'm really sorry we're going to have to finish it there. And I'd just like to thank all the speakers, including Neil Duncan Jordan, who had to leave us. And I'm no doubt we'll be looking at what's going on in Macclesfield. All of you for coming along, and those who managed to chip in and who will put stuff in the chat. And just to say, we will be picking up these issues, and we work together in working groups, and they're all open. You're welcome if you just let me know that you want to come along. We have a politicians group, which is probably the biggest group, a carers group, a trade union group, and a publicity group. We get together, as well as a sort of steering group, which is also open to the regular activists. And we do try and plan what we're going to do. We don't have a huge hierarchy. We don't have much money, so that's another issue. But we do very much welcome people just putting their penneth in, whatever. We know people are very busy, they're carers, they're confronting all sorts of other issues. So we just welcome people coming along and doing what they can do and giving as much as they can give in terms of their time, energy and ideas. And we are optimistic at the moment that slight breakthroughs are happening. Things are going to change. So let's end on a note of hope and thanks. And just to say, the chat will be open for another 5 or 10 minutes, because I know people haven't had a lot of time to put stuff in. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Well
Take care. Night. Look after yourselves. We are our own resource.
Bye, everyone.
Bye. Bye. Bye.